Okay, hello guys, welcome back to Fun of DSE. We are in DSE Biology chapter 16. And in this chapter, we are going to talk about two coordination systems. One is called the nervous system, another one is the endocrine system. Whatever the system is, whenever we talk about the coordinate system, there must be a stimulus and then we trigger the factor and it brings about a response. So for the nervous system, it contains the CNS and also PNS. For the CNS, it contains the brain and also the spinal cord. And for the PNS, it contains the cerebral nerves and also the spinal nerves. The basic unit of the neural system is neuron. If you want to know more, please go to Google and look for this particular video. And for the structure of neurons, here is the general structures. Remember that for the dendron is the way into the cell body, and for the axon is the way out of the cell body. And the cell are usually wrapped in a myelin sheet, and we will discuss it in a greater details. For the dendron and axon, they are transmitting a nerve's impulse. It is a technical and professional term that you should always include in your answer. And for the myelin sheet, it is to protect and insulate the nerve fibers because the nerve impulse by nature is electrochemical, and that's why it can trigger the other nearby nerves. In Chinese, we call it as qi. Okay, so for the myelin sheet, it prevents this from happening, prevents the transmission of nerve impulse into the surrounding, and because it is wrapped up in a fat tissue, that will also speed up the transmission rate. And there will be generally three types of neurons: sensory, motor, and also interneuron. And their difference will be mainly for their function and also their dendron and axon length. For sensory neuron, it has a long dendron, short axon. And for interneuron, it's mainly found in the CNS. It has both shorter dendron and also short axon. And for motor neuron, it has short dendron and long axon. And I strongly recommend you to think of the reason why, because if you know the reason, things will be more reasonable. And for a structure of nerves, it is composed of a lot of neurons grouped into together, and it will serve as the nerve fibers and finally to nerves. And also it will contain connective tissues and blood vessels, which will support oxygen and nutrient to the nerves. And how the nerve's impulse will be transmitted between neurons, it will be discussed in greater details in the synaptic transmission in the YouTube videos. And for the connective point, we call it as the synapse. And if you want to know more, it is included. However, how a electrical impulse is transmitted within a neuron, it is no longer in the DSE curriculum. So this is how the synaptic transmission is possible. When the synaptic impulse arrives in the presynaptic nerves, the synaptic vesicles will release the neuron transmitters, and the transmitters will be diffused across the synaptic cliffs, and eventually it will stimulate the dendron and the cell body of the next that is called the postsynaptic nerve to generate a nerve's impulse. And for the importance of these structures, because only the ending of the presynaptic nerve contains the neuron transmitter, that's why we ensure a one-way transmission. In English, we also call it as unidirectional. And one neuron can trigger multiple neurons to respond. That's why communication is possible, and we have a coordination involving many receptors and effectors. In the CNS, it composed of bones, membranes, and also cerebral spinal fluids. And for the terms like the cerebrum and the vertebral column, first one you may forget it, but for the second one, I recommend you to spell it. And for the function of the cerebral spinal fluid is to provide nutrient and oxygen to the neuron and to remove waste, and it also serves as a shock absorber. And because it's fluid nature, it also provides a mechanical support to the brain and also the spinal cord. And for the term brain actually consists of three components: the cerebrum, and also medulla oblongata. For the cerebrum, the left-hand side will respond for the right-hand side of your body, and for the right-hand side of your cerebrum will be responsible for the left-hand side of your body. And it is highly folded because it is to pack as many neurons as possible in a limited space. And we also have to understand about the layers, that is the covering of the cerebrum. For the outer layer is the gray matter. It composed of mainly of cell bodies, that's why the light cannot penetrate easily. And for the inner part, it is white matter because it's mainly composed of the myelin sheath. And for the function of cerebrum, it is the site of intelligence. That's why thinking, making decisions, and having memories are all requiring a functional cerebrum. That's why we call people are not using their brain. We call it 唔經大腦. Okay. And the cerebrum is also controlling the voluntary actions. Voluntary actions means that the actions are under your conscious control, which means that you know what you are doing. However, in our real life, a lot of people are doing voluntary action without any notice, which is very sad biological truth. And there are different functional areas, the sensory areas, motor areas, and also association areas. I don't recommend you to remember the exact position of it because I don't think it is really that necessary. And for the cerebellum, it is also highly folded. Similar to the cerebrum, the outer layer is gray and the inner layer is white. And the function is to coordinate muscle movement and also to maintain your body balance. That's why the loss of function of the cerebellum, then you will fall on the ground. And for the medulla oblongata, it is opposite to the cerebrum and also cerebellum. The outer layer is in white matter and the inner layer is the gray matter. And its function is the reflex centers for many reflex action. Remember, many, it doesn't mean all, okay? And it is controlling the involuntary actions like breathing and also heartbeat. And for the structure of the spinal cord, we have to distinguish the two sides. One is called the dorsal side, another one is the ventral side. And its structure is similar to the medulla oblongata. Why we want to know about the dorsal side and the ventral side is because for the dorsal side, it contains the sensory neuron, which means that it is the region that you will receive the nerve impulse from your That's why we have a region called the dorsal root ganglion, which is a swelling to distinguish the dorsal root and also the ventral root. And for the ventral root, it doesn't have any swelling. And the function of the spinal cord is to relay the nerve impulse between the brain and also the other body parts. Relay is a very technical term that you have to use this particular term in this context. And it also serves as a reflex center of many reflex actions, including the trunks and the limbs. And it comes to the next part about the reflex action. For the reflex action, it is inborn, rapid, and automatic. And we have a technical term to call it, that's called the stereotype, which means that the same response will always be triggered by the same stimulus. And it is involuntary, so you don't involve your cerebrum. However, your cerebrum will still be noticed if something really happens, okay? So it will produce a fast response to protect you from danger. And there will be generally two types of reflex in our curriculum. This is called the withdrawal reflex and also kick jerk reflex. And other than this, we also have the coughing and swallowing. However, in our syllabus, it is not the main focus. In order to take the exam, you have to remember that other than these two, we also have others. That will be the main point. So for the withdrawal index, this is the general phenomena and procedure of the withdrawal index. The main point is it doesn't involve the cerebrum, and the nerve impulse will still travel to the brain through and other routes. That's why you have a sense of pain if you are really pinned by a pin, and it is very fast. And for the kick jerk reflex, this is a general procedure. And for the process involving the reflex action, we call it the reflex act, that is the pathway. And for the withdrawal reflex, here is the reflex act, and for the kick jerk reflex, here is the reflex act. You may notice that for the withdrawal reflex, it contains the interneuron, but it is absent in the kick jerk reflex. So that is an important point. And for the voluntary actions, it is under your conscious control of your cerebrum. So here is the general phenomenon of a voluntary action. Sometimes you may not need a stimulus, like you go to study. You may not be asked by your mother, but you can still go to study. So there is a difference between the reflex and also voluntary actions, and you are required to at least remember two of them. And completing the nervous system, we will move to the endocrine system. For the endocrine system, it is produced by the endocrine glands to produce hormone, and the hormone will be diffused into the blood. That's why it is also known as the thymus gland. because the blood is the main medium for transport. And the hormone is mostly protein and lipid. And in your chapter 5 and 6, we talk about why protein and lipid are important to our body, because they are hormones and they are required in the regulation of the body process. And here are some endocrine glands. The first one is called the pituitary gland, which is a particularly difficult one to spell. However, you still have to remember it because it will repeatedly appear in your elective section. And for the pituitary glands, it will affect growth, reproduction, and also urine concentration. And the thyroid gland, it is affecting the metabolic rate. And for the adrenal glands, it is for flight and flight reaction because it's responsible for producing the adrenaline. And for the pancreas, it is responsible to produce the glucagon and also insulin, which is required in the regulation of the blood glucose level. And for male, we have testes, and for female, they have ovaries, and they are responsible for the development of the reproductive system and also secondary sexual characteristics. And for hormones, they are chemical in nature. That's why we only need a very small amount to trigger the effect, and it will circulate in our blood, and it may not act on only one organs. It can act on many different organs, but it will only have the related effect on the target organs. And the example will be the blood glucose level, which we will talk about in chapter 18 in the greater details. And for menstrual cycle, it is covered in your chapter 13. And here is the general structure of how the regulation of blood glucose level is brought about. You may notice there is a stimulus, and then you have some target organs to produce a response. And the main point is after everything, the blood glucose level returns to normal. And here is how we compare the hormonal coordination and also nerves coordination system. And the nature is greatly different. And for the speed is also greatly different. That's why for growth, we don't need nervous control because it will be too horrible. You will grow overnight, so which is not really that possible. However, if you want to prevent yourself from danger, you don't want your reaction speed to be too slow. That's why there is such a difference. And also the nervous system is localized effect, which you want to move your fingers and just your fingers is moved, but not your toes. However, for the growth, you may want a wide spread and multiple targets effect. So here is an extract from the AKA document. You should bear in mind that you know what is a nervous system, and in the nervous system, it contains the CNS and also PNS. For the CNS, it contains the cerebrum, and also medulla oblongata. And for the spinal cord, what is the function is to relay the signal between the brain and also the other body parts. And the basic structure is the neuron, and you have to understand neuron. There will be three types: sensory, interneuron, and also motor neuron. And between the neurons, we have the synapse. So how the signal is transmitted across the synaptic cliffs is another issue. And then we also talk about the reflex, that is the reflex action. And we have two examples, that is the kick-jaw reflex and also the referral reflex. Finally, we will talk about something about voluntary actions. However, you are always kindly reminded that people are doing voluntary actions without any noticing, which is very sad. And then for hormone response, the nature is chemical, and we have to understand where are those hormones are produced and what are the possible functions in this particular chapter, because the greater details will be discussed in chapter 18 and also your elective section. So here will be the end of this revision material. So see you guys next time. Bye.